The moment Rebecca Stone demanded I demolish my deck, she had no idea she was threatening the man who built her entire house 15 years ago. I'm standing there holding my permits while she waves her clipboard, and all I can think about is the 1,200-page file sitting in my truck. Every shortcut, every code violation, every structural compromise the developer forced me to hide in these houses. By the time I was done, 23 homes would be red tagged. Rebecca's house would need $180,000 in emergency repairs, and this gentrified HOA would learn why you don't attack the contractor who knows where all the bodies are buried. 6 months ago, this HOA president stood in her driveway watching county inspectors condemn her house. She was crying, making frantic phone calls to her bank, realizing her $825,000 dream home needed repairs she couldn't afford. I watched from my deck, the one she'd tried to force me to demolish, and I felt nothing but cold satisfaction. She'd declared war on a working-class contractor. She had no idea I'd spent 15 years documenting every structural nightmare hidden behind these perfect suburban facades. If you love stories where HOA tyrants get exactly what they deserve, hit that subscribe button right now. What would you do if someone threatened to sue you over property you built with your own hands? And where are you watching from? Drop a comment below, because I guarantee half of you have dealt with HOA nightmares just like this. My name is Tommy Sullivan. Everyone calls me Tommy. I'm 58 years old, and I've been a general contractor in Colorado for 36 years. My hands are scarred from years of gripping hammers and power tools. My knees are shot from decades of crawling through attics and crouching on concrete. My back sounds like Rice Krispies every morning when I roll out of bed, reminding me of every foundation I've poured, every roof I've framed, every structure I've built. But I love what I do. Building things, creating homes where families will make memories, watching empty dirt lots transform into neighborhoods. That's not just work to me, that's legacy. Every house I've ever built carries a piece of me. The care I put into making sure foundations are level, the pride I take in making sure walls are plumb and square, the satisfaction of handing keys to a young family moving into their first home. My father was a contractor, his father before him. I grew up on job sites, learning the trade from men who believed that a contractor's reputation was built on the quality of work that nobody ever sees. The foundations buried underground, the framing hidden behind drywall, the electrical work concealed in walls. Do it right the first time, because shortcuts always come back to haunt you. That was the Sullivan family philosophy. I started my company, Sullivan Construction, when I was 22 years old, fresh out of trade school, full of ambition, armed with my father's tools and his reputation. For 36 years, I've built homes, commercial buildings, additions, renovations. Some jobs were big, some were small, but every single one was built with the same standard. If it has my name on it, it's built right. I married Sarah when I was 23. She was a school teacher, patient and kind, with a laugh that could light up a room. We had a good life, simple, honest, working class. We never got rich off construction work, but we paid our bills, saved what we could, and built a life we were proud of. Sarah supported my business through the lean years, celebrated with me during the good years, and never once complained about the long hours or the physical toll the work took on my body. 15 years ago, in spring 2008, I stood in an empty field outside Boulder with a developer named Preston Whitmore. The morning air was crisp, carrying the scent of sage and pine from the nearby foothills. The Rockies stretched across the western horizon, snow-capped peaks catching the early sunlight. It was the kind of Colorado morning that reminded you why people moved here. The economy was starting to crack, housing market getting shaky. Bear Stearns had collapsed in March, and smart people were getting nervous about what was coming. But Preston had financing secured and ambition to match. He'd bought 47 acres of gently rolling terrain with mountain views, and he wanted to transform it into Willow Creek Estates. 52 custom homes, luxury mountain suburb, half-acre lots where families could live the Colorado dream. Preston was everything I wasn't. Mid-40s, perfectly styled hair, designer suit, even on a construction site visit. The kind of confident smile that came from closing deals rather than pouring concrete. He'd made his money in California real estate during the boom, and he talked about Colorado like it was an undiscovered gold mine waiting for someone smart enough to capitalize. He offered me the general contractor position for the entire development. Not just one house or a phase, but all 52 homes. It was the biggest job of my career by a factor of 10. The kind of project that could set my company up for years, establish Sullivan Construction as a major player in Boulder County, maybe even let me hire more crew and expand beyond the small operation I'd been running. "Tommy, I've done my research on you," Preston said, spreading blueprints across a folding table we'd set up in that empty field. "Your reputation is solid. You're known for quality work, meeting deadlines, staying on budget. That's exactly what I need for this project." The blueprints showed beautiful homes, craftsman-style architecture, open floor plans, modern kitchens, mountain views from every lot. The engineering specs looked comprehensive: 12-inch foundation footings, proper drainage systems, adequate structural members, everything designed by a reputable engineering firm. I should have known something was wrong during that first meeting, but I was too excited about the opportunity. Preston pointed at the foundation specs with his perfectly manicured finger, and his tone shifted from friendly to calculating. "Tommy, these engineering requirements are overkill. I've built in California, Arizona, Nevada. I know what works and what's just. Engineers covering their asses. We can shave $8,000 per foundation using 8-inch footings instead of 12-inch. The soil reports show stable ground. There's no reason to waste money on excessive concrete." I'd been contracting long enough to know when someone was cutting corners. "Preston, we're building on expansive clay soil with 15% slope. The engineering report specifically requires 12-inch footings with proper drainage. Skimp on foundations and we'll have settlement cracks within 5 years." Preston smiled that salesman's smile. "Tommy, either you're my guy or you're not. I need someone who understands that perfect is the enemy of profitable." I needed the work. My wife Sarah had just been diagnosed with MS. Medical bills were piling up, and this job would secure our family for years. So I made a deal with the devil. I agreed to build Willow Creek Estates, knowing Preston would push every shortcut imaginable. What I didn't tell Preston was that I'd document everything: every corner cut, every code violation, every structural compromise. Photos, notes, emails, inspection reports. I kept it all in case this decision came back to haunt me. Construction started June 2008. My crew and I broke ground on the first phase, 18 homes including lot 47, which would eventually become Rebecca Stone's house. The foundation pour should have been straightforward, but Preston showed up that morning with his cost-cutting agenda. "Tommy, I talked to the concrete supplier. We can use a 2,500 PSI mix instead of 3,000 PSI and save $1,200 per house." Preston held his coffee cup like it was a prop in a business school presentation. "Preston, the engineering specs require 3,000 PSI for structural integrity. You can't just change concrete strength because you feel like it. The building inspector won't know the difference. It all looks the same when it's poured." That's when I started taking photos. I documented every concrete truck delivery ticket showing 2,500 PSI instead of specified 3,000 PSI. I photographed the 8-inch footings where 12-inch were required. I recorded every conversation where Preston overruled engineering specifications. The foundation inspection came 3 days later. Inspector Rodriguez was a good guy, thorough but fair. He checked the paperwork, examined the pour, and signed off. What he didn't know was that Preston had submitted falsified concrete test reports showing 3,000 PSI compliance. I discovered this when I found copies in Preston's site office trash can. I confronted Preston in his air-conditioned construction trailer. "You forged test reports? That's fraud. If these foundations fail, people could get hurt." Preston closed his laptop and leaned back in his leather chair. "Tommy, you're a good contractor but a terrible businessman. Every developer in this industry makes adjustments. It's how projects stay profitable. You can either finish this job and take care of your wife's medical bills, or I can find someone else who understands reality." I thought about Sarah, about her medication costs, about our mortgage. I kept building, but I kept documenting. Over the next 2 years, Willow Creek Estates rose from that empty field. 52 homes, each one beautiful on the surface. Craftsman-style exteriors, modern kitchens, hardwood floors. Buyers paid between $450,000 and $650,000 in 2009 to 2010, thinking they were getting quality mountain homes. What they actually got were structural time bombs, foundations poured with substandard concrete, load-bearing walls framed with undersized lumber, electrical panels with inadequate capacity, roof trusses spaced too far apart, deck connections using wrong fasteners. Every single shortcut Preston forced me to accept, I documented with photos, notes, and dates. House number 47, Rebecca Stone's future home, had everything wrong with it. The foundation had visible settling cracks before we'd even completed framing. The master bathroom was supported by 2x8 joists where code required 2x10s. The deck was attached with 3-inch lag bolts where structural requirements specified 6-inch through bolts with washers. I told Preston all of this. He told me to frame it up and move on. When Willow Creek Estates was complete in 2010, Preston threw a grand opening party. Champagne, catered food, a banner reading, "Mountain Living Perfected." He sold out within 6 months. Preston walked away with his profit. I got paid my contracting fee. And I kept my 1,200 pages of documentation locked in a fireproof safe in my garage. I bought Lot 12, one of the smaller homes I'd built. It wasn't perfect, same shortcuts as the rest, but I knew its flaws and could maintain them. Sarah and I moved in, grateful to have a roof over our heads even if I knew the foundation would need monitoring. For 13 years, Willow Creek Estates existed in suburban peace. Original buyers were working-class families, teachers, contractors, nurses, people who mowed their own lawns and fixed their own fences. The HOA was minimal, $50 per month covering snow removal and minimal landscaping. Nobody cared if your fence was cedar or vinyl, if your deck was stained brown or gray. Then 2020 happened. COVID sent tech workers fleeing California, bringing their remote work salaries and their expectations. Willow Creek Estates, affordable compared to California real estate, became gentrification ground zero. House number 47, sold in June 2021 for $825,000. The buyers were Rebecca and Marcus Stone, late 40s tech executives from San Francisco. Rebecca worked in product management for a software company. Marcus did something with cloud architecture. They'd sold their San Francisco condo for $1.4 million and thought Colorado was a bargain. I met Rebecca the week they moved in. She was directing a moving crew with military precision, wearing designer athleisure that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage. I walked over with a plate of Sarah's cookies, introducing myself as their neighbor and the contractor who'd built their house. Rebecca accepted the cookies with a polite smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Oh, you're the original builder? We'd love to pick your brain about potential renovations. This house has good bones, but definitely needs updating to modern standards." "Just be careful with any major changes," I said. "The structure has some quirks you'll want an engineer to review first. We've got an architect from Denver. I'm sure he knows what he's doing." That was the last friendly conversation we had. Within 6 months, Rebecca Stone became HOA President. The election was a formality. She ran unopposed after convincing the board that Willow Creek Estates needed professional leadership to protect property values. Her first action was raising HOA fees from $50 to $300 per month for necessary improvements and aesthetic upgrades. The improvements were predictable. She hired a landscaping company to replace practical xeriscaping with water-intensive Kentucky bluegrass. She installed decorative street signs with Willow Creek Estates in script font. She commissioned a neighborhood entrance monument with stacked stone and lighting. Then came the rules. Rebecca's new architectural review committee published a 47-page guideline covering everything from approved paint colors to acceptable mailbox styles. Fences had to be specific heights. Garage doors required pre-approval. Holiday decorations were limited to specific dates. I watched my neighborhood transform. The Martinez family got fined $500 for having a vegetable garden visible from the street. Old Tom Chen received a violation notice for parking his 15-year-old truck in his own driveway because it was aesthetically inappropriate. Single mother Jenny Rodriguez got cited for her chain-link fence not matching the approved vinyl style. Replacing it would cost $8,000 she didn't have. The working-class families who'd built this community were being pushed out by aesthetic fascism and financial pressure. It was gentrification by HOA policy. I kept my head down and my mouth shut. Sarah's MS had progressed, requiring expensive medications and frequent doctor visits. I couldn't afford HOA battles or legal fees. I maintained my modest home, followed the new rules, and tried to ignore Rebecca Stone's mission to perfect our imperfect neighborhood. Then last summer happened. Sarah passed away in June. 42 years of marriage ended by a disease that slowly stole her away. The grief was crushing, but I kept working. Working was all I knew how to do. I decided to build a deck in her memory. Sarah had always wanted a deck where we could watch summer sunsets over the mountains. For 13 years, I'd promised next year because money was tight or time was limited. Now she was gone, and I'd never delivered. That August, I pulled permits through Boulder County, structural plans, electrical inspection for the lighting, everything by the book. The county approved my permits within 2 weeks. I started construction in early September. The deck was simple but solid, 12 by 20 feet, pressure-treated lumber, proper ledger board attachment with through bolts, concrete pier footings below frost line, code-compliant railings. I built it the way I'd wanted to build every structure in Willow Creek Estates, the right way. I was installing the railings on a Saturday afternoon when Rebecca Stone appeared in my backyard. She wore white pants and a cream blazer like she was attending a country club brunch. She held her clipboard like a weapon. "Mr. Sullivan, what is this?" She gestured at my half-built deck with obvious distaste. "It's a deck!" For my wife. She passed in June. "I'm sorry for your loss, but did you get HOA approval for this structure?" I pulled the folded permit from my tool belt. "I have county approval, engineering plans, inspections, everything legal." Rebecca barely glanced at the document. "County permits are irrelevant. Our CC and Rs require Architectural Review Committee approval for any exterior construction. You should have submitted plans 3 weeks before beginning work." "Rebecca, I've been a contractor for 36 years. This deck meets every building code. It's safer than half the structures in this neighborhood." "That's not the point. The point is maintaining community standards. This deck uses pressure-treated lumber when our guidelines specify composite materials for aesthetic consistency." I felt something cold settle in my chest. "You want me to tear down a permitted code-compliant deck because the wood isn't pretty enough? I want you to follow the same rules everyone else follows. Submit proper plans, get ARC approval, rebuild with approved materials." She handed me a violation notice. "You have 30 days to either comply or remove the structure. Failure to do so results in fines of $200 per day and potential legal action." I watched her walk away, her designer heels clicking on my concrete patio. That's when I decided to open the safe. That evening, I spread 1,200 pages of documentation across my dining room table, 15 years of evidence. Every photo, every note, every email, every inspection report. The entire sordid history of how Willow Creek Estates was built wrong. I spent 3 days organizing everything chronologically by house number. House number 47, Rebecca Stone's house, had 127 pages of violations. Substandard foundation concrete, undersized floor joists, wrong deck fasteners, missing structural elements, cracked foundation photos from 2008, email chains where I warned Preston about settlement issues. I knew what I had to do, but first I needed to try diplomacy. I attended the next HOA board meeting in late September. The community room in Rebecca's house was decorated like a corporate boardroom. Rebecca sat at the head of the table, flanked by her board members. All new residents, all gentrifiers, none who'd lived here during construction. "Mr. Sullivan, you requested time to address the board?" Rebecca's tone was pure corporate politeness. I placed a folder on the table. "I'm requesting an exemption for my deck. It's fully permitted by the county, structurally sound, and built as a memorial to my late wife. I'm asking the board to show compassion and approve the structure as is." Rebecca didn't even open the folder. Our rules exist for good reason. Granting exceptions undermines the entire system. The deck must be rebuilt to specifications or removed. "Rebecca, I built this entire neighborhood. I know these houses better than anyone. My deck is safer than most structures here." "That's irrelevant to our architectural guidelines." Board member Sharon Hoffman chimed in. "Mr. Sullivan, we understand this is emotional, but rules apply equally to everyone." "Do they? I pulled out a second folder. Because I have documentation showing serious code violations in multiple homes, including this one we're sitting in. The room went silent. Rebecca's expression hardened. Are you threatening us? I'm informing you. If you force me to demolish a legal, permitted, safe structure because it doesn't match your aesthetic preferences, I will provide county building officials with documentation of actual code violations throughout this development. Violations that could result in red tags, property devaluation, and expensive repairs. Board member David Chen shifted uncomfortably. What kind of violations? Structural, electrical, foundation issues. The kind that affect safety and property value. Rebecca stood, her face flushed. This sounds like extortion. It's information. You can approve my deck, or you can deal with the consequences of how this neighborhood was actually built. Rebecca's voice went ice cold. Get out of my house. Consider yourself in violation. Fines start tomorrow. And if you persist with these threats, we'll pursue legal action for defamation and harassment. I gathered my folders and left. As I walked to my truck, I knew what came next. The next morning, I drove to Boulder County Building Department. The clerk at the counter was Maria Gonzalez, who'd been processing my permits for 20 years. Tommy! Haven't seen you in a few weeks. What brings you in? I set a USB drive on the counter. Maria, I need to report code violations at Willow Creek Estates, multiple structures, safety concerns. Her expression shifted to professional concern. How serious? Foundation failures, structural deficiencies, electrical issues. I have documentation from original construction. You built Willow Creek, didn't you? I did. And I documented every shortcut the developer forced on me. It's time someone knew the truth. Maria called over her supervisor, Tom Davidson. For the next 3 hours, I walked them through my documentation. Photos of substandard concrete pours, emails showing Preston's cost-cutting demands, inspection reports I'd kept that showed violations before they were covered up, videos of cracked foundations, engineering specifications next to what was actually built. Tom whistled low. Tommy, this is extensive. We're talking dozens of code violations across 52 homes. 23 homes have serious structural issues requiring immediate attention. The rest have moderate violations that need eventual remediation. Do you know what this means? We'll have to inspect every single property. Some might get red tagged. Property values will collapse. You'll have an entire neighborhood angry at you. They're already angry at me for building a safe deck. At least this way they'll know the truth about their houses. Tom nodded slowly. Okay, we'll start the inspection process. This will take months, and it won't be pretty. I know. 2 weeks later, Boulder County mailed inspection notices to all 52 Willow Creek properties. The letter explained that credible evidence of construction deficiencies had come to light, requiring mandatory structural inspections at county expense. Homeowners were not being accused of violations. This was about original construction quality. My phone started ringing immediately, neighbors demanding to know if I was behind this. The answer was yes, though the county couldn't legally confirm the source. Some neighbors understood. Most were furious. Rebecca Stone went nuclear. She hired an attorney and filed a lawsuit against me for defamation, harassment, and tortious interference with property values. She held an emergency HOA meeting where she tried to rally the neighborhood against me. Tommy Sullivan is a disgruntled resident trying to destroy our community because we enforced basic rules. His baseless accusations have triggered these inspections, which will cost us all time and money, proving our homes are fine. But here's what Rebecca didn't understand. County building inspectors don't play games. When they inspect thoroughly. And when they have documentation showing what to look for, they find it. The inspection started in November. Boulder County didn't mess around. They brought structural engineers, soil specialists, foundation experts, electrical inspectors, building code enforcement officers. They had my documentation telling them exactly where to look, what to measure, which corners had been cut. Inspector Maria Gonzalez led the team. She'd been with the county for 23 years, and she took building safety seriously. I'd worked with her on dozens of projects over the years, and she knew I wouldn't fabricate evidence or exaggerate problems. The first inspection was house number 1, owned by Dave and Susan Patterson. They were both school teachers, original buyers from 2009, people who'd stretched their budget to afford their first home. They stood in their driveway watching nervously as inspectors crawled through their basement with flashlights and measuring tools. Maria emerged after 2 hours with a tablet full of photos and notes. Her expression was grim. She called Dave and Susan over, showed them photos of their foundation walls. Visible cracks, settlement patterns, concrete that crumbled when tested with a scratch tool. Mr. and Mrs. Patterson, I'm required to inform you that your foundation shows significant deficiencies. The concrete strength is approximately 2,500 psi, when code requires 3,000 psi. The footings are 8 inches where engineering specs called for 12 inches. We're seeing settlement cracks exceeding acceptable limits. You're going to need foundation repairs. Susan started crying. Dave looked like he'd been punched. How much are we talking about? Ballpark estimate, $45,000. You'll need a structural engineer to provide exact specifications, but that's the range we typically see for this level of foundation work. I watched from my truck parked down the street. I felt sick. These were good people, hard-working people, people who'd trusted that their house was built correctly. Now they were facing financial disaster because Preston Whitmore had wanted to save $8,000 per house. House number 8 was next. House number 12, my own house, came the following day. Maria was gentler with me, but the news wasn't great. My foundation showed the same substandard concrete and undersized footings, but because I'd been monitoring it and maintaining it carefully, the settlement was within acceptable limits. I'd need about $8,000 in preventive repairs, sealing cracks, improving drainage, installing monitoring systems. Painful, but manageable. House number 15 belonged to Tom Chen, the elderly man Rebecca had cited for his old truck. The electrical inspection revealed his panel was drastically undersized for the home's electrical load. The inspector found signs of overheating, fire hazards, code violations that should never have passed original inspection. Mr. Chen, your electrical system is unsafe. We're requiring immediate upgrades before this becomes a fire hazard. You're looking at about $12,000 for a new panel and circuit upgrades. Tom just nodded quietly. At 72 years old on a fixed income, $12,000 might as well have been $1 million. The inspections continued through December. Each day brought new horror stories. House after house revealed the systematic fraud Preston had perpetrated. Foundation problems, structural issues, electrical hazards, plumbing deficiencies. 23 homes got official violation notices requiring immediate repairs. Another 15 got warnings of moderate deficiencies to address eventually. The neighborhood Facebook group exploded with panic, anger, confusion. Some people blamed me for triggering the inspections. Others understood I was exposing problems that existed, whether we acknowledged them or not. Arguments raged about property values, repair costs, who was responsible, whether we should sue the developer. Rebecca tried to maintain control through it all. She held emergency HOA meetings, brought in lawyers to discuss legal options, attempted to rally the community. But her authority was crumbling. Every day brought new evidence that the perfect neighborhood she'd been trying to protect was built on a foundation of lies. Then came house number 47. Rebecca and Marcus Stone's inspection was scheduled for December 18th, a cold Tuesday morning with fresh snow on the ground. I didn't attend. I'd seen enough heartbreak, but Maria called me that evening. Tommy, you need to hear this. House 47 is the worst one yet. She emailed me the preliminary report. I read it sitting at my kitchen table, and even though I documented every problem years ago, seeing it in an official inspection report made it real in a new way. Foundation, substandard concrete confirmed by core samples showing 2,400 psi instead of required 3,000 psi. Settlement cracks exceeding 1/4 inch in multiple locations. Inadequate footings at 8 inches instead of specified 12 inches. Visible foundation movement. Structure. Master bathroom floor, joists at 2x8 instead of required 2x10, showing excessive deflection when loaded. Main beam and basement undersized for span, showing stress cracks. Multiple framing members not meeting code requirements. Deck. Rear deck attached with 3-inch lag bolts instead of required 6-inch through bolts with proper washers and backing plates. Ledger board attachment insufficient. Deck represents collapse hazard under load. Electrical. Main panel undersized at 150 amps, where home load requires 200 amps. Evidence of circuit overloading. Several outlets showing signs of overheating. Plumbing, main sewer line improperly pitched, contributing to drainage issues. Several fixtures not vented correctly. The inspector's conclusion was devastating. Structure requires comprehensive repairs before property can be considered safe for occupancy or eligible for sale. Estimated repair costs, $180,000. Immediate structural engineering assessment required. Yellow tag issued pending repairs. A yellow tag, not quite condemned, but close. The house couldn't be sold or refinanced until repairs were completed. The bank could potentially call the mortgage due if the property was deemed unsafe. Insurance companies often canceled policies on yellow-tagged properties. Maria told me Rebecca had collapsed when they delivered the news. Just sat down on her front steps in the snow and sobbed while Marcus made frantic phone calls to their bank, their insurance company, anyone who might help. The county posted the yellow tag notice on their front door that afternoon. Bright yellow paper, official seal, impossible to ignore. Every neighbor walking by could see that house number 47 had serious structural problems. Rebecca showed up at my house the next evening. No clipboard this time, no designer blazer. She wore a puffy winter coat over sweatpants, and her face was bare of makeup. She looked like she'd been crying for hours. Her eyes were red and swollen, her normally styled hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. She looked 10 years older than the confident woman who demanded I tear down my deck 3 months earlier. I was sitting on that deck when she walked into my backyard. The irony wasn't lost on me. The structure she'd tried to force me to demolish, the memorial to my wife that she'd called an aesthetic violation, was now the place where her world was collapsing. "You destroyed my house," she said. Her voice was flat, exhausted, all the fight gone out of it. I set down my coffee cup. The sun was setting behind the mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. Sarah had always loved these sunsets. I documented how your house was built. The county destroyed nothing. They just revealed the truth that was always there. We paid $825,000 for this house. The bank is calling our mortgage. Our insurance company is threatening to cancel our policy. We got quotes from structural engineers. The repairs will cost at least $190,000, maybe more. We don't have that kind of money. I tried to warn you, Rebecca. The day you served me that violation notice, I told you this neighborhood had structural issues. I told you my deck was safer than most structures here. You didn't want to hear it. She wrapped her arms around herself, shivering despite the heavy coat. I thought you were just making threats, trying to intimidate me into backing down. I was trying to warn you. There's a difference. You did this because we told you to remove your deck. Her voice cracked with emotion. You ruined our lives, destroyed our investment, humiliated us in front of the entire neighborhood, all because we enforced HOA rules. I stood up slowly, my bad back protesting after sitting too long in the cold. No, Rebecca, I did this because you weaponized those rules to push out working families who'd lived here since the beginning. I did this because you turned our neighborhood into your personal aesthetic project while sitting in a house that's structurally unsound. I did this because you cared more about matching mailboxes than you cared about the people who actually built this community. We were just trying to protect property values. By fining a single mother $500 for having a vegetable garden, by citing an elderly man for parking his truck in his own driveway, by threatening to sue me for building a memorial to my dead wife. My voice stayed calm, but there was steel underneath. You weren't protecting property values. You were enforcing your vision of what this place should be without caring who you hurt in the process. Rebecca's face crumpled. She sat down on one of my deck stairs, shoulders shaking. What am I supposed to do? We put every dollar we had into this house. Marcus wants to walk away. Just stop paying the mortgage and let the bank take it. We're talking about divorce. Our marriage is falling apart over this. For the first time since this whole nightmare began, I felt something other than anger toward Rebecca Stone. She was scared. She was financially trapped. She was facing the destruction of everything she'd built. I knew that feeling intimately. I'd felt it 15 years ago when Preston had forced me to choose between my conscience and my wife's medical care. I sat back down, my old joints creaking. You hire a structural engineer. You get proper specifications for the repairs. You take out a home equity line of credit or a personal loan. You make the repairs the right way, and you learn from this. We already have a second mortgage from renovations. No bank will loan us more money on a yellow tag property. Then you sell it as is to someone who can afford the repairs. You take the loss and you move on. Or you fight through it, make the repairs over time, and maybe come out the other side stronger. That's easy for you to say. Your house only needs $8,000 in repairs. It's easy for me to say because I've been monitoring my foundation for 13 years. I knew what was wrong with it because I built it. I've been doing preventive maintenance, managing the drainage, watching for problems. You bought a house without knowing its history, and now you're paying the price for that ignorance. Rebecca wiped her eyes with her coat sleeve. I'm sorry about your wife. The deck is beautiful. I was wrong to try to make you remove it. Thank you. But I still don't understand why you kept quiet for 15 years. If you knew these houses were defective, why didn't you report it when they were first built? It was a fair question, one I'd asked myself 1,000 times. Because Preston Whitmore had me trapped, my wife had just been diagnosed with MS. We had massive medical bills. This was the biggest job of my career, and if I'd refused to continue or reported him back then, he would have destroyed my business, sued me into bankruptcy, and made sure I never worked in this county again. I made a choice to protect my family, and I've had to live with that choice every day since. So you compromised your principles for money. I compromised my principles for my wife's health. Don't pretend you don't understand that. You moved here because you could get more house for less money. You bought a defective property because the price was too good to pass up. We've all made compromises, Rebecca. The question is what we do when we finally have the chance to make things right. She stood up slowly. I meant what I said. I'm sorry about your wife, and I'm sorry about the deck. But I'll never forgive you for destroying our investment. I can live with that, but maybe think about the families you were destroying with your rules before you decide who the real villain is here. Rebecca walked away without responding. I watched her cross my yard and disappear around the corner of her house, her yellow-tagged, structurally compromised, $190,000 problem house. The neighborhood descended into chaos over the following weeks. The reality of what had happened settled over Willow Creek Estates like a heavy snow, cold and inescapable. Property values didn't just decline, they collapsed. Overnight, every house in the development became suspect. Even the homes that had passed inspection without major issues carried the stigma of being part of a fraudulent development. Real estate agents started pulling listings. Potential buyers heard about the inspection crisis and fled. Banks put holds on refinancing applications, unwilling to loan money on properties that might need expensive repairs. Homeowners who had been planning to sell found themselves trapped. Who wants to buy a house in a neighborhood where half the properties need major structural work? The first family to give up was the Johnsons in house number 9. Their foundation needed $52,000 in repairs they couldn't afford. They stopped making mortgage payments in January and let the bank foreclose. They lost their down payment, their equity, everything they'd worked for. I watched them load their furniture into a U-Haul on a cold February morning, their 3 kids crying in the driveway. And I felt the weight of every compromise I'd made 15 years ago. More foreclosures followed. Houses that needed $40,000, $60,000, $80,000 in repairs. Working families who couldn't come up with that kind of money. They walked away from their mortgages, destroying their credit, but escaping the financial trap. The families who stayed formed a class action lawsuit against Preston Whitmore Development Corporation. Susan Martinez, a paralegal who lived in house number 14, took the lead in organizing it. She compiled evidence, found attorneys willing to work on contingency, and built a case for construction defect fraud. The lawsuit revealed Preston's entire pattern of criminal behavior, falsified inspection reports where inspectors were paid to look the other way, forged engineering certifications on structural plans, test reports showing concrete strength that was never actually tested, building permits obtained through bribes to low-level county employees. A systematic operation designed to cut costs through fraud. Preston's development company had dissolved in 2012, shortly after the last home sold, but his personal assets weren't protected from lawsuits. The attorneys discovered he'd transferred millions in profit to offshore accounts, purchased property under his wife's name, set up shell corporations. The legal team worked to pierce those corporate veils and access his personal wealth. Criminal charges followed in March. The Boulder County District Attorney filed charges against Preston Whitmore for construction fraud, falsifying official documents, bribery, and reckless endangerment. Each count carried potential prison time. Federal charges came later when the investigation revealed he'd defrauded federally backed mortgage lenders. Preston fought every charge with expensive attorneys, but the evidence was overwhelming. My 1,200 pages of documentation became the foundation of the prosecution's case. Photos, emails, inspection reports, videos, everything I'd collected over 15 years proved systematic fraud. Rebecca's lawsuit against me got dismissed in February. Her attorney, reviewing the evidence I'd provided to the county, realized defamation required false statements. Everything I'd reported was documented fact, and Colorado law has strong whistleblower protections for people reporting building code violations and construction fraud. The attorney recommended Rebecca drop the lawsuit before it resulted in sanctions for filing frivolous litigation. She agreed, and the case was dismissed with prejudice. She'd spent $15,000 on legal fees for nothing. The HOA board collapsed in stages. Rebecca resigned as president in late December, unable to maintain authority while her own house was yellow tagged. The board's treasurer, who lived in one of the houses needing major repairs, resigned in January when he couldn't afford both the HOA dues and his foundation repairs. By February, the entire board had quit. An emergency election was held in March. The new board consisted entirely of original residents, working-class families who'd lived here since 2009 to 2010. Tom Chen became president despite being 72 years old. Jenny Rodriguez became treasurer. Dave Patterson took the role of secretary. Their first action was rolling back Rebecca's changes. HOA fees dropped from $300 per month to $75, just enough to cover snow removal and basic maintenance. The 47-page architectural guidelines were replaced with a single page of common-sense rules. Keep your property reasonably maintained. Don't create safety hazards. Respect your neighbors. My deck was officially approved with a formal apology from the new board. Tom Chen delivered it personally. Standing on the deck, Rebecca had tried to force me to demolish. Tommy, on behalf of the community, I want to apologize for how you were treated. Your deck is beautiful, and it's a fitting memorial to Sarah. We were wrong to threaten you. Thank you, Tom. That means a lot. I also want to thank you for exposing the truth about these houses. I know it cost you. Half the neighborhood hates you right now, but you did the right thing, and eventually people will understand that. I hope you're right. The repair process stretched across 2 years. Some families found the money through home equity loans before the crisis, scrambling to get financing before their property values collapsed completely. Others worked out payment plans with contractors, doing repairs in stages as they could afford them. A few qualified for emergency county assistance programs designed to help low-income homeowners with critical repairs. The county, embarrassed by how Preston's fraud had slipped through their inspection system, created a special fund to help Willow Creek residents. They allocated $2 million in emergency assistance, prioritizing families who couldn't otherwise afford repairs. It wasn't enough to cover everything, but it helped. I did what I could to help my neighbors. I offered my contractor services at cost. No profit margin, just materials and labor expenses. I worked with families to prioritize repairs, figuring out what needed to be done immediately versus what could wait. I helped them interview structural engineers, review bids, understand the technical requirements. Some people accepted my help gratefully. Others refused, still angry that I'd triggered the crisis. I understood. It's easier to blame the messenger than face the truth about what you're living in. The Patterson family in house number 1 was one I helped personally. Dave and Susan were good people, dedicated teachers who'd stretched to afford their house. Their $45,000 foundation repair was beyond their means, but they qualified for $20,000 in county assistance. I offered to do the work at cost for the remaining $25,000 and set up a 5-year payment plan so they wouldn't lose their home. We spent 6 weeks that summer doing the foundation work, excavating around the perimeter, installing new footings, reinforcing walls, waterproofing, installing proper drainage. Dave helped when he could, learning the work, understanding how foundations should be built. One evening after work, we sat on his patio drinking beer, both of us exhausted and covered in concrete dust. Dave looked at his house with new appreciation. "I thought I understood what I'd bought," he said quietly, "but I had no idea what actually goes into a foundation. No idea how important getting it right really is." Most people don't. They see the pretty kitchen and the nice bathroom and assume everything underneath is solid. That's what Preston counted on. People not knowing enough to question what they couldn't see. Do you regret staying quiet all those years? It was the question everyone wanted to ask, but few had the courage to voice. Every single day, but I also don't know what else I could have done that wouldn't have destroyed my family. Preston had me trapped, and I made the choice I could live with at the time. But you made it right eventually. I tried. But a lot of people are still hurting because I stayed quiet as long as I did. Dave was quiet for a moment, watching the sunset paint the mountains gold. For what it's worth, I don't blame you. I blame Preston. You were trying to survive. He was trying to get rich off fraud. There's a difference. Rebecca and Marcus Stone eventually made the repairs to house number 47. It cost them $190,000, more than the estimate, and they had to take a second mortgage. They put the house on the market in spring of this year. It sold for $625,000, a $200,000 loss from what they'd paid. I saw Rebecca at closing. She looked exhausted, older than her years. Before she got into her U-Haul, she stopped by, where I was checking my mailbox. "I owe you an apology," she said quietly. "You were right about everything. I was so focused on making this place perfect that I couldn't see what actually mattered." "People matter more than aesthetics," I said. "Families building lives matter more than matching mailboxes." "I know that now. Too late, but I know it. It's not too late to be different in your next place." She nodded, climbed into her U-Haul, and drove away. I never saw her again. Today, Willow Creek Estates is different. The working-class families who survived the crisis own their neighborhood again. Jenny Rodriguez still has her chain-link fence. Tom Chen parks his truck in his driveway. The Martinez family tends their vegetable garden. My deck is finished. I sit there most evenings, watching the sunset, paint the Rockies in shades of gold and purple. Sarah never got to see it, but I talk to her sometimes while I'm out there. I tell her about the neighborhood, about the families who stayed, about learning that sometimes protecting what matters requires destroying what looks perfect. The lawsuits against Preston are still ongoing. He'll probably go to prison. The county changed their inspection protocols because of this case. Now they randomly audit construction projects, reducing opportunities for the kind of fraud Preston committed. I'm still contracting, but I'm selective now. I only take jobs where I have full control over quality. I'm 58 years old with a bad back and scarred hands, but I'm building things the right way. Every house I touch gets built, like it's for my own family. Sometimes I think about those 15 years I kept silent. Could I have stopped this earlier? Should I have refused to build substandard work, regardless of the personal cost? I don't know. I made the choices I could live with at the time, and when I had the chance to make it right, I did. The lesson I learned is this: you can hide the truth, but eventually it comes out. Foundations matter more than facades, and when you attack someone who knows where all the bodies are buried, don't be surprised when they start digging. Rebecca Stone wanted a perfect neighborhood. What she got was the truth about how imperfect her perfect house really was. Sometimes the worst violation isn't breaking HOA rules. It's forgetting that homes are built on foundations, and those foundations better be solid. My deck stands solid because I built it right. My neighborhood survived because people fought for what mattered, and Rebecca learned that pretty rules mean nothing if the structure underneath is broken. That's the story of how one HOA president's quest for aesthetic perfection exposed an entire neighborhood's structural nightmares. If you're dealing with HOA tyranny, document everything, know your rights, and remember that truth is stronger than any clipboard. What's your worst HOA horror story? Drop it in the comments. I read every single one. And if this story helped you understand your rights against HOA overreach, hit that subscribe button. We've got more stories of justice served and neighborhood bullies getting exactly what they deserve. Thanks for watching. Stay strong, document everything, and never let anyone make you tear down something you built with love.